Hi everyone, in this video I would like to tell you a story about how I left my previous workplace and the company I loved very much. If you work in a good company, if you have a good paycheck, good benefits, and especially if you worked in that company for a long time, it is very hard to make a decision. It is very hard to leave that company. This video is my story about how it all went, what kind of decisions I made, what were they based on, and so on. As with all my videos, I hope you'll get some useful information, and if you're in a similar situation, you'll be able to make an easier decision watching this video. So stay tuned.
Hostile territory.
Now, first, I would like to tell you how I made my decision about leaving the company. Now, if you watched my previous videos, I've mentioned the company a couple of times. It's a big international company, decent paycheck, good benefits. They treated me very well, and the possibility of me finding another company like that in the town I live in is equal to zero. The job market here is very bad. It's crummy. It's full of low paid jobs. In most companies, you're treated like garbage. So you can only imagine, also as a sole provider of the family, how much I sat on the decision to leave that kind of company. But there are two things that made the decision practically for me. The first one was how my coworkers treated me within the branch office. As I mentioned, I worked within a branch office. There was the head office, which was 400 kilometers away, and there was the branch office where I worked. To make a long story short, I had problems with them from the start, although in my opinion, I minded my own business. I just wanted to work in a good company and, just earn my paycheck. Honestly, I had problems with them, with the relations with them, with how they worked, with how they treated me within the company, and so on. And I think that my coworkers would have a thing or two to say about my behavior within the company, but I don't know, this is just my honest opinion. I had big problems since my boss was a narcissist and besides that, a serious alcoholic. Then there was the woman working there who was the mistress of the boss, and they had this full-blown affair going on in real time within the company. They were like husband and wife. And there was the third guy who I also mentioned in my previous videos, who was their best friend and their best man. I don't know how to call it. And this guy was a serious slacker. He didn't like to work and so on. So I constantly had problems with them excluding me, with them trying to push me out of the company, with their plotting in the final phases, with them giving me pep talks about how I didn't work enough, how my behavior was like this and that. And mind you, as I said in the testimonial video, I sacrificed about 3 years of my life for that company to make things better within the company, to make the branch office work and the company acknowledge that, and also to save my job, but to save their job also, because I trained them for the work they did, for most of the work, and that made them keep their jobs. And all I got in return was them despising me and trying to push me out of the company all the time. I think that I managed to endure a pretty long time, but at the end it was simply not possible. The other thing that made me leave the company is a serious decline in my health. Before all of this, I had bulletproof health, and all to the period of about 4 to 5 years of me leaving the company, it was very good. Despite all the strains, despite all the overtime work, despite the non-sleeping, despite the poor eating and everything else, I managed to keep my health in good condition, because I live on a homestead. I work all the time when I come from work. I kept myself in pretty good physical condition and so on. But I guess after all that time, the body simply crumbled and I started losing my health, and I started having serious health issues even to this day. So when I saw that also, that was the second reason that made me simply think that it's game over and that I should leave the company. Now, once I made my decision, of course, I had to find a way to leave the company as best as possible. As the saying goes in my country, you should never close the door with your behind. So if possible, you should leave a good impression even when you're leaving. Exceptions would be if you were really treated like trash and treated harsh, in that case, perhaps you don't have to do it. But even then, leaving a decent impression when you're going is a good thing. So my plan was to first tell the boss in my branch office and then tell the head office. Everyone when leaving the company had this sort of custom to write a farewell email and to tell everybody thanks, everything was good and all of that. And, I was really going to do that. That was my plan. But as fate would have it, it went totally different. What happened is that I told my boss, and mind you, I didn't expect any kind of, how should I put it? I didn't expect any kind of gratitude, or I didn't expect anyone to tell me, oh no, you should stay, what's going on. I didn't expect any kind of talk or anything like that, but I did expect at least for someone to ask me what the problem was. And in that manner, I would say a couple of words about what the problems were within the branch office and everything else. And perhaps that would shed some light on the whole situation. Essentially, it was sort of a quasi SOS to the head office about what was going on within the branch office, so they would perhaps get off their behinds and do something. Sort of a last resort for trying to keep my job and stay there, and in case it doesn't work, I would leave. That's the whole thing. But of course, nothing of that worked. I told my boss that I was leaving, and he was just, he didn't really care about that. He just said, when are you planning to leave? He didn't ask me what the problem was, because he knew what the problem was very well. He didn't ask me anything. He just told me, well, when are you going to tell the head office and what are your plans and so on. And that's that, that was the whole conversation. And I just told them that I would have to leave as soon as possible because I have other obligations, and that's that, and that I'm going to call the head office and tell them. So that was that part. But now comes the part where I was really sort of stunned, and to be honest with you, I was sort of hurt. There was this guy in the head office, which was our main boss. He was the guy who was responsible for almost everything in the branch office, and he was the guy who we asked for everything when there was a problem. He was the guy who gave us better conditions for working within the branch office. He was the person who raised our paycheck, and he was this big person in my eyes, and I'm very grateful to this day for knowing him and for him simply being a good person and making this strenuous job that we all did much easier. Anyway, I expected from him to call me and to at least ask me what the problem was, and to simply have a conversation where I would finally be able to be sincere with him, tell him what the problem was, and this may sound pathetic, and to warn him about the problems within the branch office. The boss and his mistress were taking control over the branch office. They were these sort of people that, in my opinion, could cause different sorts of problems. And, what can I say? Again, pathetic, but I love the company. I really wanted the company to continue working. Despite the fact that I was leaving, I wanted the company to continue working in a good fashion. Perhaps they didn't deserve that. Perhaps, again, I'm this idealistic person, but, that's the truth. But what happened? 2 days after I told my boss in the branch office that I was leaving, I got the call from the head management, from my main boss. The whole conversation finished in about 2 minutes. I mentioned this in one of my previous videos. The guy just told me, is it true what I've heard? And I said, yes, it is. And he said, well, I see you've made up your mind. I can't do anything about it. And that's it. When did you plan to leave? And I was stunned. I expected a bigger type of conversation. And I just told him I have to leave within the week. I have different obligations. He told me, could you wait for 2 weeks because I can't find a replacement that fast. I told him I'm sorry. And I really did have obligations, but also, staying 2 more weeks with my coworkers who hated my guts. And working in that kind of environment, and they know that you're gonna leave, you can expect all kinds of trouble, being swamped with work, giving you all sorts of risky work for you to do since you're leaving and so on. And I just wanted to leave as soon as possible. That was one of the main reasons. Anyway, that was it. It was all finished in a matter of 3 or 4 minutes. So 12 years of contacting that person, working with him, working with the head office, doing lots of useful things for the company, saving the company lots of money. And there were like hundreds of different situations, all finished within 3 or 4 minutes. And that's how it ended. And I never saw that person again. Never did he call me, never did we talk again. You know, it was, to this day, I have never had even a phone conversation with him after all that time. Later, I returned to the branch office and, you know, just gathered my stuff, gathered my things, and simply left. I didn't even want to say goodbye to my coworkers after all that time, because I was simply, that was the point to which I was fed up with them. Now, was this a good exit? You'll agree, no, it wasn't. You know, this was exactly doing the opposite of what I told you. I closed the door with my behind, to some extent. But my case was sort of specific. I think that there was a lot of talking behind my back from the boss and from his mistress. I think that the main boss from the head office already had this notion that it was pretty much already time for me to leave, and I think they just searched for an opportunity for me to go away. Because, you know, for the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 months, they were really, the people in the branch office were really on my case. And the boss from the head office, there was not a chance in hell that he couldn't see what was going on with the behavior of the boss, with the love affair, with the amount of work that was done, with all the things that I did within the branch office. There was not a chance that he couldn't see that. And I sort of painted this picture for myself. And to be honest, I think I was right, that I should leave before all hell breaks loose and everything collapses on my head, in the terms that they would lay me off in any case, you know, because I saw how they treated me. I saw how the boss from the head office talked to me and so on. I mentioned this in previous videos, and simply my position wasn't the same as it was in previous years, and it was deteriorating. So if I didn't leave the company on my own, I think they would do that for me in a very bad manner. So if you work in a good company, don't do it this way, do it the right way. The right way would be, and this is just my opinion, is for you to first tell your boss. If they ask you to stay in the company until they find a replacement, do so. If they ask you for a couple of weeks or even a month, do so. If they treated you properly, if they ask you to teach someone else about your job position, also do that. Have a proper goodbye to everybody within the company, and that's that. Again, I would do that if they were different towards me. Now, another thing that I did not do properly when I left the company is to make a sort of tactical retreat. I've talked this in my video about how to make a good exit strategy. What can I say? Again, the conditions that I was in were dramatic, and I think if I were in the company for a couple of more months, I think that it wouldn't be good for me. There would be more damage than gain. But if you still can tolerate your coworkers, if you're not in danger of getting into any kind of trouble, there are a couple of things you could do to gather the paycheck and the benefits and work a couple of more months in the company and still leave properly. Those things would be to try and relieve the workload from yourself as much as possible. So don't work as much as you used to. Then try to slack off at work as much as possible. So go to any kind of breaks or something like that as much as you can. Then try to avoid any kind of responsibilities as much as possible. Try to change your stance towards certain things that you tolerated before. What you'll see, and this is again from experience, is that people will change towards you. If people are accustomed to you doing their workload, if they're accustomed to you being quiet when they're doing certain things and so on, when you change that, there will be a change in their behavior. And usually that behavior goes for the worse. If you work in a good company, perhaps that worse and bad behavior will be noticed, and perhaps those people may get fired from the company because of that. And in that case, your situation may change. Other people may arrive, and this is just one option that could happen. My point on this part is to always sort of think through the possible steps of what may happen when you're leaving, and to try this approach before you actually leave the company. Some things may change, some things may not, but it's definitely worth a try. One more thing I would like to share with you when you're making a decision to leave your present workplace is that you are dispensable, if I've used the right term in English. Whatever position you obtain, however big the position is, however specific the position is, the company will find a way to replace you, and replace you very quickly. For instance, I worked in a pretty specific position, did lots of quality work. The company had lots of benefits from my work, I think so, and I think they found a replacement fairly quickly. And this is just the way things go. Account for this when you're making the decision. If it's based on you being indispensable and that nobody can replace you, think twice. So, dear viewer, what can I say at the end of this video? I am really I'm sad that I left that company, to be honest with you, and to this day I think about it. Although I've been through all kinds of horror stories in that company, but again, the company wasn't the fault, the co-workers I worked in the branch office were. And trust me, if it was different, despite the huge workload and despite all of the problems that go with the job, I would still happily work in that company if I had a different team. But this is perhaps how things go in life, and I don't know. If I didn't leave it, I think I would have more serious health problems, and everything, it would just be even more unbearable. So for the end, what would be the takeaway of all this? A couple of things would be: never put yourself, and I've talked about this in a separate video, never invest yourself in any kind of job more than 50%. Or on a scale of 0 to 10, go with a 5. Never go with a 10. Exceptions would be if you got a very good paycheck, very good benefits, you're gonna have a promotion soon or something like that, then put about 80% of yourself. Always leave that 20% for yourself and your family and your friends and everybody else. The other thing would be, and I've mentioned this numerous times, the moment the job starts affecting your health, the moment it starts putting you down physically and psychologically, leave it. No matter how good the job is, how good the money is, leave it as soon as possible. Nothing is worth your health, and you should keep it intact as much as possible. Trust me, this comes from someone who to this day has health repercussions from the previous situations at the workplace. So that's it for this time. I hope I didn't take too much of your time. Sorry for the bad English and for the occasional strange phrases that I use. I'm not a native English speaker, so I hope you don't mind. Please like and subscribe. It's a huge help for what we're doing. Watch our other videos. Hopefully you can find lots of tips for surviving in a toxic and hostile workplace. It's a bad place to be, and you need all the help you can get. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your time, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.